What are the pros and cons of living in Japan? That's going to be the topic of today's video. Now, many expats want to come to Japan. What are the good things and the bad things about living in Japan, both from a financial and non-financial perspective? Now, let's start with the good things, the pros. Now, first of all, there are some decent job opportunities in Japan. Many studies from HSBC and others have found that expat salaries in Japan are amongst the highest in the world, but they're limited, which is a con, right? It's not like a Chinese situation or Indian situation where there's room for more expats, or for that matter, a Dubai or Singapore where there's millions of expats. In Japan, the high-paying positions are more limited, but they are good if you can find them. So that's one pro of living in Japan. Number two, it's a very easy place to live in general. It's clean, it's polite, and so on and so forth. What is true is the bureaucracy and some of the ways of doing things can get infuriating for some people. But if you've lived, as I have, in places like China and Southeast Asia, Japan's actually relatively easy. Number three, I would say the food and drink scene is very good. If you like cafes, bars, restaurants, or whatever you like, in fact, you can find it, especially in a big city like Japan. Number four, believe it or not, getting an expat visa now in Japan is actually very simple for most people in most circumstances. Because of the Asian population, it's quite simple to actually get in the first place. Also, number five, it's not an aggressive culture. So a lot of people come to Japan, they're worried about xenophobia, racism, and so on. Some of that is well founded, not all of it, but it's very unlikely you're going to face some kind of aggression, like people actually attacking you or being very overtly aggressive to you. You could walk around at 3 o'clock in the morning as a foreigner, you won't face any problems almost for sure. However, I would say some of the negatives are this. First of all, it's pretty expensive, but it's not as expensive as people think anymore, but it's quite expensive. Linked to that, taxes are high in Japan, at least after a few years. There are certain incentives for foreigners in Japan on overseas income and so on, but if you actually remit money into Japan and you're getting paid from a local corporation, unless you become an independent contractor, taxes are very high. If you include taxes and cost of living, it's more expensive than Singapore, because Singapore, the cost of living is higher, but the taxes are lower, and there's no tax on overseas income. So if you think about it, if you're making a really high amount of money, it's actually often better to pay higher amounts in living costs but lower taxes. So bear that in mind. Number three, of course, even though English is getting better, it's not a Dubai or a Singapore or Hong Kong. English is still limited. You can get by, but you're going to need basic Japanese to make your life a bit more easier. That's fine. That's a positive in some ways. You can learn a new language, at least the basics, but bear that in mind. And linked to that, also, English language jobs are less common. So in Singapore, if you're bought over by your corporation, for example, let's say you work for PwC in the UK or the US, you're bought over to Singapore on a 2-year contract and it ends, and you want to stay in Singapore because you like it, there's loads of English language jobs available in Singapore because of the nature of the market. Same in Dubai. In comparison though, in Japan, often if you're bought over on a 2 or 3 year contract, at the end of that contract, unless you want to go on local terms, it's not easy to find another employment opportunity. That's why a lot of the very long-serving expats in Japan start their own business. How can I help you? In 2 ways. First of all, are you an expat, a high net wealth individual, or just somebody who lives in a part of the world where it's difficult to get access to quality investment solutions? In which case, go onto my website on adamfayed.com and find out more. If you don't fit into any of those categories, then in which case there's a range of free material on my website, on this YouTube channel, and indeed on my Quora, where I get over 200 or have received over 231 million views in the last few years. And finally, if you want to actually read my thoughts in more detail, go onto Amazon and find my book on there.